I can say it. Buenos dias. All you Spanish learners, again, buenos dias. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much. I don't have anything to say after that. It's amazing. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Equality Alliance, Christian Ramirez and Ricardo and the San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium, Jean. There's probably 10 organizations in this room that I've done work with as a journalist. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be representing what Martin Luther King stood for. As a journalist, I'm not supposed to be an activist, and I'm supposed to be impartial, and I'm not supposed to have a bias, and I'm not supposed to have an opinion. None of that is true. I carry all of those things. My understanding of good journalism is to report on injustice. That's my job, is to find out where the scales of justice have been tipped to one side or another, in favor of the rich, in favor of the powerful, in favor of the politically strong, and report on it, and call them out, and hold them accountable. And the only way I can do that is with individuals such as yourself who are on the front lines. So I'm probably going to make a big mistake here and let you know that if you have a story, if you have an issue, if you have a concern, a problem, if you see injustice, if you can't seem to get any heat on it or help with it, talk to me afterward. I hope there's not a long line. I'm not kidding. Because the state of journalism today and the state of the media today is not to go towards your stories. It's to go toward something that's hyped, something that is salacious, something that's pretty. I'm going to do it right now. I was just looking at my phone, and I was on Twitter, and I looked up, I'm going to say it, I'm probably going to ruin everybody's breakfast, Donald Trump. Tavis Smiley last week called Donald Trump a serial racist. A journalist who has his own show on PBS called out a man of power and a man of means and the leader for the Republican nomination as a serial racist. Is that good journalism? Or is that an opinion? Or is that a bias? Donald Trump is being supported by Aryan nations. They are performing robocalls for him. He has called out Muslims. He has called out Mexicans. He has denigrated women. Should he be called out for it? Should we report about those parts of his candidacy? Or should we give him a free platform to say whatever he wants so that we can book him, so that we can give him a microphone so that his voice becomes louder? So I looked on Twitter, and I put in the search word for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has a faux pas with quoting the Bible. Donald Trump has no comments about Martin Luther King Day today. Donald Trump is leading in the polls. I'm just reading a news feed on Donald Trump. I don't see anything about racist comments. I don't see anything about the fact that he's been divorced 3 times. I don't see anything about the fact that he's declared bankruptcy 4 times. I don't see anything about the fact that he has raped and pillaged the environment when he puts up his buildings or that he hires undocumented immigrants. Whose job is that? If you're supporting Donald Trump, that's not what this is about. If it sounds like I'm denouncing the man, I'm not. I'm reporting on him. I'm telling you the truth. So what I'm saying today is that our media and journalism, when it comes to people of color, when it comes to the marginalized, when it comes to the oppressed and the discriminated against, seems to be looking the other way. We seem to be giving a platform to the most powerful. We seem to be giving a platform to those who can buy it. The media has been corporatized. What we hear and what we get as far as information is concerned, sorry to say the word, has been whitewashed. I'm not here to depress anyone. I'm here to tell you that that's not the channel. I'm asking you all to be citizen journalists. Today, as we sit here and enjoy our breakfast and have a nice venue, and we're all warm, teachers in Detroit are taking photographs of the state of their school, and they're publishing them on social media. They're showing the broken toilets and the mold growing on the walls and the roof with holes in it. They're not going to the local reporters, they're taking matters into their own hands. They are reporting on what they see. My code of ethics as a journalist requires me to do one thing, and I want to read it, and I want to get the words wrong. Public enlightenment is the forerunner of justice. Public enlightenment, what we know, what we hear, what we perceive as fact or truth, is foundational to our society. If we're misinformed or not informed, society crumbles. It's the forerunner of justice and the foundation of democracy. Our democracy requires that we become informed. But if the source of information is about the weather, or sports, or celebrities, or the fact that Star Wars is no longer the #1 movie, I saw that on the news today. Where do we get it? Where do we get the information of what's going on in your communities, what you're struggling with? Where do we get it? I'm looking at it. I don't know any other way. If we go back to Michigan, if we go to Flint, Michigan, the government was poisoning the residents of Michigan with drinking water, and they knew about it. Should we rely on government to protect us and inform us and direct us? We should hold government accountable. You can applaud. What about law enforcement? What about the largest law enforcement agency in this country, the U.S. Border Patrol, who in the last 6 years have shot their weapons into Mexico, a sovereign country, 10 times. Standing on U.S. soil, they've shot their weapons into Mexico, and they've killed 6 different Mexican nationals. They weren't even trying to cross the border. Should they be held accountable? Is your local media reporting on it? Should we sit back and wait for the local media to report on it? I'm sorry if you're law enforcement, and I'm sorry if you're an elected official, but that's my job. My job is to watch you, because nobody else is. You're powerful. You carry weapons. You can take away my civil rights and civil liberties. You can incarcerate me. You can accuse me of a crime. You can throw me away in jail. And I don't have a voice. How do I defend myself if you're all-powerful? It's right here in this room. I walked around all of the tables and the booths, and I saw people supporting getting rid of tattoos from gangbangers and supporting causes for anti-bullying and border issues and LGBT rights and on and on and on. It's right here. I'm just reactive. I'm not a leader. I just report. I went to dinner with some of the organizers of this event last night, and I thought I was going to have a nice little dinner and maybe a quiet time in San Diego in the evening, and they started chiming in my ears about some of the stuff that was going on here. There's stuff going on in this city that needs to be reported. I just heard someone say big time. How do we get from what's in this room to getting it out there so that there is a foundation of democracy in this city, so that there is equality. Without it, there won't be. The scales are tipped. They're tipped right now. When I was a young man, about 10 or 11 years old, I grew up near the US-Mexico border. My mother was born in Mexico, and so was I. And we were out for a walk very close to where I grew up, and you could see the border fence itself on the US side. That's where I grew up. And we were out for a walk in this area. It's very rural. And my mother and I were out in a little bit of a wilderness area. I ran off to play in a small seasonal creek while she went on with her walk. She wasn't carrying identification. This is a small, plump, brown-skinned Mexican woman who didn't speak very good English. And while I was away from her for a few minutes, she was pulled over by the Border Patrol as she was on her walk, and I was away from her, and she was interrogated. And she was asked for some form of identification, and she said that she didn't have it. And could she please go back to her home where her husband was and her ID was? She said, "I'm just out on a walk," in her broken English. And the Border Patrol agent at the time didn't believe her. Here's a woman who had lived in the United States for over 20 years and had raised children and owned property. She was a legal US resident, and she was put in the back of a Border Patrol car, and she was deported. Not because she didn't have proper paperwork, because she wasn't allowed to show that, because of the color of her skin, because she couldn't speak English. Those are not criteria to deport somebody. So when I came back to the place where I had left her, she was gone. And for 24 hours, she was missing. She came back across the border because she had papers, and there was no apology by the Border Patrol. I was a young man at the time, but that left an impression on me. I can't say that that incident is what caused me to be a journalist, but what it did do is it caused me to question authority. That's what I do today. I'm skeptical. I'm not cynical, I'm skeptical. I ask and I question. Edward R. Murrow was a journalist who believed very much the same way I do, and one of his mottos to do good work was to give a voice to the voiceless and to hold people in positions of power accountable. That's what I'd like to do. And I'm afraid that I keep criticizing my colleagues in the media. That's what we don't do anymore. That's what needs to happen here. In my career as a broadcast journalist in this county, just in this county, and I'm not a local reporter. Some of the stories were mentioned earlier. There's a canal east of here that was drowning Mexican migrants as they tried to gain entry into the United States, called the All-American Canal. And the Imperial Irrigation District was reluctant to put safety features in. Every week they'd pull out another body. And they would just bury them in a pauper cemetery, and they wouldn't put in any ladders or any tow ropes to allow these individuals to gain access to the United States. They would just let them drown. And I worked on a production for 60 Minutes that exposed that, but I didn't do it. John Hunter and Laura Hunter, who were advocates and have an organization called Water Stations, told me about the story, and we put it on television. The story of Anastasio Hernandez Rojas was brought to me by Equality Alliance and the ACLU. The story about Escondido impounding the cars of undocumented immigrants by using a de facto sobriety checkpoint and making millions of dollars, taking vehicles away from undocumented immigrants, was brought to me by activists in Escondido. And exposing that helped to change the tenor of the way that the police do business, and the chief of police of Escondido resigned shortly thereafter. I am a conduit. I'm not a leader. I just put on what you tell me and try to make the best report I possibly can. I'm here as best as I possibly can. And, I'm not a rallier, but as best as I possibly can to encourage you to not remain silent. If we feel like the scales are tipped against us, which I think in some form they are, and when I say us, I'm a Mexican-American man who has witnessed discrimination and oppression, not necessarily personally, but certainly in my family. I'd like to represent those voices, but I need to hear from you. Don't give up. It's really hard. I had videotape of a man who was brutally beaten and I believe killed by 12 Border Patrol agents. The man was handcuffed, he was hogtied, he was surrounded in the center of a circle as Border Patrol agents and members of Customs and Border Protection took turns kicking him and punching him and tasing him. And a couple of days later, he died. I had videotape evidence of this, a Rodney King moment. And I took it to ABC News National, and they didn't want the story because it wasn't for them. And I took it to NBC, and they said yes, and then they decided to water down the report, and ultimately they said no. I had videotape evidence of a man being brutally beaten by federal officers, and eventually he died. Some people say he was murdered. I had videotape evidence in my hand for a year, and I couldn't get anyone to broadcast it. Thank you, Gene Iredale. As a result of that report, Congress acted, activists marched, a grand jury panel was convened, an investigation ensued, and they found no criminal charges. Should I give up? That's a 5-year struggle without what one would call justice. I'm not going to give up. Thank you, Rafael Castellanos, for supporting my work. Thank you, Pedro Rios, if you're here. Thank you to the organizations who have given me the stories, who have been courageous enough to put themselves on camera, to bare their souls, to expose themselves to scrutiny and judgment. Thank you to all of you If I have one thing to say about what I do for a living and what you all do for a living, we work on the same level. I'm not supposed to be an activist, and I'm not supposed to have a bias, and I'm not supposed to have an opinion. But I can't sit and watch injustice before me and not do something about it. I get labeled as a reporter as being an activist quite a bit, and that's okay with me. It's deadly as a journalist to be labeled as an activist because that means I have a take. And I do have a take, and I think that you all have a take. I feel like I'm at home with my family here, and my take is for justice. Justice means equality. Very simply put, it means that the scales are even. I'd like to join you, and I'd like you to join me, and those like me, to use our resources, to use our strengths and our talents to create justice, because that's how it happens. We have to create it. We can't wait for it. We have to create it. We have to find the avenue, no matter how difficult, no matter how many times we get knocked down. We have to find the avenue to create it. It's available for us. It is possible. But it takes everybody in this room. If you feel like you're not empowered, if you feel you don't have the skills, join a group, make a donation, meet somebody, volunteer. Every little bit helps. I want to thank Equality Alliance. I want to thank the city of San Diego, where I grew up and where I was formed. I was formed on the US-Mexico border. I have a foot in both countries, and I'm grateful for that. I don't want a wall built between us. I'd like to unify. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm going to offer anything that you want to talk to me about. If you want me to help you and you help me, I'm here. I am a public servant, just as you all are. I am here to inform, and I'm here to pass on the work that you guys are doing. I want to thank you for your gracious invitation and your time. Thank you so much.